Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of Ignite. This is Dr. Shali Genga, and I'm so excited to bring this to do this episode. We have a very interesting topic, and we have a very exciting, interesting, and very knowledgeable guest. Please tell us, your
Yeah,
name.
thanks, Charlie, for having me. My name
Mhm,
is Paps Wanyugi, and I love saying I am your partner in creating the extraordinary life you
mhm.
desire and deserve. I'm a life coach and a confidence coach and wellness coach in that matter. I work with women, preteens, and teens in areas of purpose, clarity, emotional wellness, and inner confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Today's topic we are looking. The topic is when I am the villain. And
Mhm.
as often as usual, we always like to look at the meaning of a word. Villain is defined as a villain is a cruelly malicious person who is involved or devoted to wickedness or crime, a scoundrel. Another definition is a villain is someone who deliberately harms other people or breaks the law in order to accomplish what he or she wants. Now, in my 20s, I was very sure that everyone else had a problem but me. I was so sure that if there was a villain, it was someone else, and I always played, I was the hero or the victim. But as you get a little older and you start hitting your 30s and you are self aware, because not everybody has the self awareness, you come to realize that the duality of human nature, that you can be a hero in someone's story and the villain in someone's story. Now, the interesting thing is that you can be both the intentional and the unintentional villain. You can be the villain who intentionally went out of your way to hurt someone, and the unintentional villain who hurt someone without even knowing that you played the villain in their life. And a lot of people really struggle with putting themselves as a villain because we always like to think of ourselves as the hero. And of course, when I think of the Bible, I think the best example of the character in the Bible who brings out these roles very beautifully is the story of David. In one area, we have God saying that David is a man after God's heart in First Samuel 13 and 14 and Acts 13 and 12. And then in another area, in Second Samuel 11 and 12, David not only committed adultery, he had the husband of the lady he committed adultery with killed. How do you put these two people together? The hero and the villain. I don't know, perhaps when are we
Mm.
the villains in our life? And it's not always easy because when we look at TV,
Mhm.
the villain always has like a long mustache or he has horns or there's a way
Yeah.
that villains always look.
Mm.
And so bringing the lens to yourself is always a challenge
Mhm.
and a scary experience, but I think that sometimes it can be very freeing sometimes when you realize that sometimes you too can
Mhm.
be the villain in somebody's life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So who is the, if you were to give us your opinion, like who is the villain?
Mhm.
Mm.
Thanks, Charlie. And so, first of all, it's just important that to just reflect on all the stories, especially childhood stories,
Mhm.
like Cinderella
Mm.
and the Beauty and the Beast. Like there's always that image of who the villain should become, and it's rare that we see ourselves in those lenses.
Mm.
And it's because human beings have been created to believe that they always have the best interest at heart, even when they are murdering, even when
Mm.
when they're probably violating other people's boundaries. You
Mm.
always believe you have the best interest at heart.
Mm.
In terms of our selfish nature is also very self-defensive,
Mm.
and we always believe the best about ourselves. And of course, Shirley has mentioned two dimensions of the villain,
Mm.
the hero, and of course, we want to introduce the third person who is the victim. And so every space of my life, in all my relationships, I'm either a victim, I'm a villain, or I'm a hero.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I am playing the hero role too much, I can actually fail to see the villain and the victim because I keep on showing up as the hero. And sometimes
Mm.
we say in relationships that is overfunctioning.
Mm.
When you're overfunctioning in a relationship, it's because you always see yourself as the hero. I'm here to the rescue, the messiah complex. You always feel like I am the upper hand in everything I do.
Mm.
But you don't realize in the process, you leave many victims behind. And you're also a villain in terms of how you show up to some people. Even in our workplaces, like you
Yeah.
walk into an office, there are three definitions of Paps. even probably with the people I work with, there are three definitions of Paps. There's someone who's like, she's a villain. Someone else, oh, she's a victim of life. Things that just don't go well for her. And then there's someone who's like, Paps is our hero, And so it's important to, first of all, just question yourself even right now in the relationships that you're struggling with and the places where you're feeling stuck. Which one are you?
Can you think of an example? I know this is usually a difficult question. Like
Yeah.
when you played the villain
Yeah.
in either someone's life or in your life, because I do know you can either be the barrier in your own life or the villain in your own life, or you can be the villain in someone's life, whether intentional or unintentional.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Honestly, I have like 10 examples. I don't know which one I should pick, which is the grossest. But I think for me, the place I've been villain, probably in a very conscious way, is my marriage. And of course, if you asked me, sometimes I used to feel like I am the victim. This guy should just change, should get his act together. And then sometimes I was also the hero to other people's marriages. And of course, it's a very, very subtle dynamic to come to a place of facing yourself. Because for me, for a long time, I used to make excuses. And how I broke through was year 2 of marriage. First of all, I had done psychology when before I got married. So me was like, I got this thing. Jemo is the one who should catch up. And then in the second year of marriage, I remember one morning I was doing my Bible study, and then Isaiah chapter 6 just loaded. When King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. I was like, yeah, this is an interesting story. I've heard it before. And then came to this place where he says, woe unto me, when he saw the vision of the robe or the trail filling the temple. And then he says, woe unto me, for I am a man of unclean lips, because I come from among people of unclean lips. I'm telling you, that hit me like a thunderbolt, because I was like, I'd been telling James, I can't talk like people from Kemende. I'm from Nyahururu. There's how we talk, there's how you talk. So maybe you're looking for the soft landing of my words and how I talk, you're not going to get that. Because hata nyinyi kwenye wamuongeangi, you don't express yourselves. And I think that day, just being able to see myself as someone with unclean lips, because I come from among people, because that's like, this is how we talk. This is how we've been socialized, but is it the right way to talk at people?
Because we really like to defend and say that this is just how I am. Like I
I'm
can't
like
change.
this. I am a choleric. I push people and walk all over them. This is how God has wired me. But do you see that there's also the personal responsibility? That as long as it depends on you, you live at peace with other people. Where is the compromise in terms of you being willing to reflect God, in terms of how you deal and treat other people? And so for me, it was such a wake-up call. From that time, honestly, it has been a journey. Right now, it's 11 years, guys, and it's been a lot of work. I think I'm still in the recovery road in terms of really not being the villain in my marriage. But it has been a journey of, first of all, admitting that I'm wrong. Because as long as the villain is defending themselves and what they do and how they do things, then there's no hope.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard for us to see our bad nature? We struggle so much it's so easy to hear someone's story, and like even if you look at the story of David, when the prophet Nathan came and told him there's this man who did this and did this, and he was so quick to say that's the villain. And if you hear a story, if you watch a show, you can say that's the villain, that's the hero. But in our own stories and the versions that we tell ourselves, why do we struggle to see the villain in ourselves?
First of all, it's because we don't step back and just view it as something that I'm in. I need to step back from my life every now and then. Personally, I really value retreats. Honestly, I believe just going away every month I go away for 2 nights. And those 2 nights, that is when I face my villain. That is when punching gloves off, I'm able to face myself. And I believe that is the place of Jacob in the valley of Jabbok. Where one day you need to face yourself. An angel will come and wrestle you and show you who you are. Because even had to have a change of identity. And as long as we keep on rolling in life and we never pause to reflect, and we never withdraw ourselves from those situations that we are always in. Sometimes as long as you are in the drama, you can't be able to see the drama objectively. You need to step back from the drama, and then you ask yourself very objective questions. And you face yourself and you wrestle yourself. Even him, he had to leave his wives. Nyinyi mwende his side, wife B aende his side. And then he was by himself. Sometimes we need to zone out everyone and face ourselves. Otherwise, we are never able to. Even victims. Victims don't see themselves until they step back from victimhood. And you're like, how is even being a victim serving me? Because sometimes you benefit from
No,
being a
you do.
victim.
You can benefit from anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You benefit from being the hero, people admiring you, and they're like, wow, how did you do this, Paps? Media interviews, cameras, lights on me. And also being a villain, you benefit
Yeah.
because there's some toxicity you're running away from. There are some things you don't want to face about yourself. And so you keep on projecting it on other people, and of course you blame them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, first, it's important to recognize that you have, as long as you're a human being, you have, we all have the potential to be the victim,
We have
to be the
we have
hero.
all the three.
And if we can be the hero and the victim, we can also be the cause of
Very
someone
true.
else's pain. We can also be the reason why someone can call us the villain. So it's important to first recognize, because I have met even my own self. Let me not say other people. I have met people who, when they do realize it's such a struggle to put to acknowledge it and still be okay with it.
Yeah.
What is the power, or how can you benefit, or how can you gain from being able to identify the fact that you're in a villain? And I usually like the example. I like using the example of stories. You always hear people talking about, I left that relationship because it was toxic. That person was toxic. And I think that a lot of times people don't realize that even by staying in a toxic relationship, you participated. Even in choosing someone who was toxic, there's something that was toxic in you that was attracted to you. So the person may be the villain, but you may have been also a villain in your accepting of that behavior. But when you realize that you have played the role, you've been a villain, how can that add to your life?
Yeah. So first of all, there's that part of responsibility, which you're outlining in terms of taking responsibility for my life. Because until I take responsibility in terms of, this is my 5%, this person delivered 95%, then you never shake it off. And one of the things I love saying is, try to also swap roles, just take it for a while and just ask yourself, what if this person is the victim and I'm the villain, much as I've been projecting? Because each one of us tells us stories, and sometimes we believe so many lies, because that story is always a version that favors you. But sometimes all those stories are lies, because each one of us, like there's usually a process that I normally use when you're doing emotional intelligence, where first of all there is what happens, which is very relative. It's like rain. It's not good or bad. And then I need to give it meaning so that I can feel a certain way.
Okay.
So that part of attribution of meaning, that is where sometimes the attribution is wrong, and so everything else becomes wrong. Because when I give it a wrong attribution, then I start feeling the wrong feelings, I start acting the wrong actions, and I start getting the wrong outcomes.
Before you proceed, can you create villains who are not there?
Yes.
Oh, so basically, it just depends on how you view.
And can
in
you
some
imagine?
situations.
Yeah. And can you imagine, Shirley, it's possible to live a life that doesn't have villains? It's possible for you to come to a place where nobody is my villain. I'll never give you that privilege to control my life and to be in the pedestal where you're something or someone that I keep on running away from. Because sometimes, most of the times, villains that we create in our adulthood, it's because they mirror things we've not dealt with in our childhood.
Ooh,
So there's a projection of my husband in my dad, or a high school teacher, a primary school teacher in my boss.
Ooh.
And so you're fighting imaginary people. And because you've really vibed yourself and told yourself the wrong things, you keep on losing those fights.
Let me just take you back. So you're saying that sometimes will it mean that the villain in you will come out in like because of childhood wounds? And if we don't deal with our childhood wounds, we become the people who wound other people because of wounds that we received, because of the wounds we haven't dealt with from our childhood.
Yes and no. So let me first of all put it this way. I can be someone who is laid back and who is quiet. And then probably the person that is now projected in my life right now, my boss, is behaving like that uncle that really tormented me in my childhood.
Okay.
But you see, what happens right now to the adult in me, there's how I show up as a villain who is not aggressive. But even my silence is still a villain. My avoidance is still a villain character.
Avoidance, yeah.
And so you don't see those as negative traits. The fact that I'm not assertive and I keep on withdrawing, it's because it works to my advantage. I avoid emotional pain. And that is still a villain attribute in
Yes,
its
it
own way.
is.
We keep on probably dogging people who are probably outspoken. We are like first of all, everybody who brands people narcissist, those narcissistic people are usually talkative, and they usually know what they want. But have you ever thought, pause for a moment, this person is not narcissistic, they just know what they want, they go for it at all costs, sometimes in a negative way. But can I also go for what I want instead of always thinking they should back off?
So sometimes in avoiding a certain situation or in staying quiet and enabling people to be villains to us, we are actually actively participating.
And you're actually a villain in your own way.
But we think that we
yeah.
are the good ones because we feel like we are not doing anything.
Yeah, and it's
Or we are the
because
victim.
it's because in our mind the villain is a certain way. For
The
example, let's
norms.
go back to the story of Cinderella. Do you realize that guy was also a villain? The sandal fell off. He didn't bother to go and look for her until the following day. And he sent people to go and look for her. Go and fit this sandal and see who it will fit. We glorify him in that story, but we see him as a villain. Do you see also Cinderella? What is the worst that would have happened if she stayed on that night? And so we only brand the stepmother in that story.
Yeah,
do we know the side shows? Do we know the stories? Do we know whether she was a rebellious child? Of course, she was scrubbing floors. Did she have a good attitude scrubbing the floors? And so sometimes the villain needs to be demystified. It's not always that person who is outspoken, or maybe their actions are very conspicuous. What about people who have silent actions? People who are passive aggressive? Are they villains as well?
Because if you're the boss in the office who sees someone doing something wrong and you choose to keep quiet, you are a villain. By your silence, you give permission. You've given permission. You've acted. It's just that we've not. We It's not the way Cinderella's evil stepmothers behaved or how they were seen. But by keeping quiet, you've actually you've seen something wrong being done. Or you can even be a parent who sees their child doing something wrong and you keep quiet.
Very true.
You are in many ways the villain. Yeah. The unintentional, probably. Yeah.
And of course, that villain, the problem that they have the wrong perspective about themselves, then they never help the situation. By the way, have you ever been told about where Cinderella's father is? Like, how did this woman end up being so toxic on her daughter?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We don't question the other characters in the story. We only brand one person and then we amplify that one person. And I love the example you've shared in the office in terms of all these colleagues who keep quiet because they're like, yeah, since we're nice people, we don't like drama. That boss is dramatic and that colleague is also allowing herself to be treated that way. But what do you do to stop the villain? Because you're the one who creates that toxic environment for everyone. Even people will come in future. And people who don't speak up to do good, then they're still part of the story in terms of the villain story.
And so, okay, the first point we've looked at is that you must be aware that you can be the hero, you can be the victim, you can be the villain.
All at the same time. Yes. Do you know sometimes you can be all that because you are in different relationships. So there's where you're a villain, there's where you're a victim, there's where you are a hero.
So you can play that.
Yeah.
And the second point is that when you do notice that you are a villain, whether you actively participated, whether you enabled, or whether you are a villain by your silence, how can you be a better version? Because is it a good thing when you're actually aware of what you have done, as opposed to being ignorant, like just going around causing damage everywhere and not being aware? Can you say that it is an advantage to you when you come to the realization that you may actually be the villain? What can you do about it? Yeah.
So I just love one word that you'll use for a villain that should not exist in the same sentence. Every villain should show themselves self-compassion.
Okay.
Just be compassionate with yourself and you're like, it's been hard. I actually dug my way up here. Because most of the times villains were people who were losers in the past. They were victims.
Okay.
Villains. And then probably they took a posture that was also extreme. In terms of now the aggression part and the hurtful part of who they are. Whether it's passive aggressive or outright aggressive, it's a journey to get to a villain. And you need to understand, I can't just back off one day. And I can imagine how many people are so stuck in the villain title because everybody is also labeling them.
And maybe they are not even aware.
Maybe they are not, or even they are not even villain. Maybe that is a hurt person who is just trying to defend
Ooh.
themselves. Maybe that is an inner child who is hurt,
Mm.
who is just trying to look out for themselves. And so, first of all, pause and show yourself compassion. Give yourself a nice hug, and you're like, we can get through this together. And then the other thing, ask yourself, what do I need to do right now so that I can start digging out of these pits?
And does that involve, like, if possible, going for counseling
Yeah.
or seeing a psychologist,
And for me, sometimes
psychiatrist?
also having friends who are opposites of you. Don't always be around villains and mnajichocha hapo and you guys are just like, yeah, this is how we are. People need to get used to it. Why don't you just also befriend people who are on the opposite side so that you keep on noticing how other people experience you?
Ooh, so empathy, or you
Yeah.
develop empathy for someone in a different situation than yours. Huh?
Yeah. I actually have friends and even colleagues, even on my team. I always have people who are opposite because they can be able to see it. Sometimes I'm like, guys, we need to wrap up this group. They're like, perhaps give people a bit of more time, usikue hivo, So it's important for you to have people who mirror you and they show you your other sides. Because all of us have, there's something called Johari window. It's one of the theories of psychology we normally use. And we usually say you have a blind spot, things that you don't see about yourself. And then you also have subconscious parts of yourself that you need to keep on discovering and having revelation about. And then, of course, there's what everyone knows about you. And then there's what some people know about you. But then what everyone doesn't know about you, including yourself, and what other people see about you that you don't see, those are the two places to work harder on. Because most of the times the villain, either it's a blind spot you have, or sometimes it's even an unconscious thing in terms of nobody here sees me as a villain. They just see, they describe attributes of villain, but they don't outrightly tell me, perhaps you need to work on yourself. This place, this place, this place, you're out of order. And of course, one of the things, the Holy Spirit never lies. If you have a relationship with God, you will know when you're out of order. You will know when you're out of shape. You'll know when you're out of socket. Because those places also require revelation to be able to really see them for what they are. And I believe that time when Isaiah sees himself in Isaiah chapter 6, it's because he is mirrored by God. It was that revelation and insight he had because, he was Uzziah's relative. He used to have a premium life in the palace. And then the day King Uzziah died, that is when he saw the Lord. So sometimes these broken places in our lives, which sometimes crystallize into the villain character or sometimes the victim, we need to see, even the victim, they need to see themselves from God's perspective so that they can stop being a victim. Because it's possible for you to wear those labels and identities for the rest of your life, believing that is who you are, which is not true.
Should you make amends where you can?
Yeah. Actually, villain, that is why that part of self-compassion, there's also the part of self-reflection in terms of, do I even need to apologize? Because most of the times, villain leaves many, many victims behind. We have a trail of victims. And when you're an unconscious villain, it's very difficult to apologize. Because you keep on feeling, me sikuwa intentional. I didn't hurt you intentionally. I wasn't coming after you. it just happened. But you're able to apologize even for your unconscious effects because you still hurt people.
Oh, I like that, because people think that I should only apologize for what I intentionally did,
Yeah.
not realizing that whether it's intentional or unintentional, the effects still speak for themselves. Huh?
And that is why David even apologizes for his hidden faults. Hidden faults that nobody knows, even me. And those subconscious faults that I have, because I'm always coming from somewhere, and that somewhere is not God inspired. And so in my repentance, it's because even those hidden places in my life, I want to invite God's light to be illuminated there so that that swamp is drained. Otherwise, that swamp will keep on breeding more mosquitoes.
So in closing, like, what advice would you give someone who today, or they have come to the realization they may be a villain either to themselves, or they have actively played or absently played a villain in somebody's life? Like, what advice would you give them?
For me, I will say, if you've never taken a self-awareness journey, you're doing yourself a disfavor. Regardless of which posture you're in, start with self-awareness. Go and have someone who doesn't know you, they don't care what you think about them, and have a very honest conversation with them. Just put all your cards on the table and come from a place of, I need to just know where I need to start in my life. And then the other thing, be very patient with yourself. There is nobody who will never change overnight. You didn't take an overnight to become that person. And then the other thing that I love saying, just keep on draining the swamps, especially of your childhood. Otherwise, you will always be fighting mosquitoes that are unending. And so it's important for you to go back and ask yourself, what is this telling me about my past? What insecurities am I still battling? What are the undertones? And I love using the analogy of caterpillar, which is the basis of one of the books I've done, that the butterfly, like the butterfly analogy. The butterfly was one day a pupa, one day you are a chrysalis, one day you are an egg. And the battles that you lost then, you become an insecure butterfly because it keeps on mirroring you back. So as much as there is glory, there is beauty in our adult lives, it's important for you to go back and ask yourself, how can I make peace with the egg I was, with the pupa I was, with the caterpillar I was, with the chrysalis I was? How can I make peace with my past so that I am experiencing real freedom in the short life that I'll be flying? And to remind yourself, life is very temporary. Can you imagine it's so temporary to be a villain all your life? And there are people who will find even on their deathbed at 80s and 90s and they still believe they are a victim. But everybody is like, good riddance. I don't know if you've ever seen that video. I think it was a TikTok meme of a family where someone is dying, and then when they thought he's dead, they started celebrating. Yeah. And then he coughed, like just coming from that place where you are such a villain in a way people celebrate you not being alive.
Ooh.
And even in corporates, there are people who will really want you to get fired or get transferred just because you don't see yourself as a villain. And it's about also asking for feedback. One of the things I've learned, especially to people who are very close to me, ask for negative feedback from them. Just ask them, where do you think I need to change? What are the things I need to work on in my life?
Okay, I really like that. And just to, as we come to a close, just to encourage our listeners to, just because you find out you're a villain, as you've heard, it's not the end of the world. And we are all villains in many ways, just like we are heroes and just like we are villains. What matters is what we choose to do after we discover these things about ourselves. I do hope that this episode will ignite you to grow and be a better version of yourself. Thank you so much for listening in.